For over 5,000 years, humans have been playing games. We're at a point where games became a main part of our culture and society. Yet as with most things, the inherent nature of games has changed a lot. Nowadays, we game to have fun, enjoy the presence of others, whether it is in person or online, spend some time relieving ourselves from the struggles of our daily life, or we simply play to challenge ourselves. It is simply a thing we do, because we enjoy it. It is fun. And that is good. It should be. However, I think a crucial aspect of what originally made games so important and widespread has left our consciousness, at least on the surface. You see, ancient games, and I'm talking like truly ancient games, like early forms of chess, pachisi, mancala, and so on, had an important spiritual aspect to them that cannot be denied. Modern games still have set values deeply ingrained into them. However, we no longer practice play as a ritual. Most early games had certain archetypal ideas that they conveyed, that either came from ancient texts or straight up life itself. Games were a simple tool of simulating and thus teaching simple fundamental principles of life. Let's look at a few examples. The oldest game we know of is the royal game of Ur. In this game we roll 4 four-sided dice and then move our pieces along a predetermined path. You can also call these type of games race games, because we're racing each other. It is really dependent on your luck. At first you want to roll high numbers to advance along the track, but then in order to leave the board and secure points, you need to roll exact numbers. You can also land on a spot where your opponent has a piece to kick him off the board, halting his progress. But if we condense the whole game down to its core principle, we get luck. More precisely, faith. Not only was the game a fun and carefree way to spend your time, it was also being used to illustrate the concept of faith. The more you are aligned with the higher realms that dictate our universe, the better your dice rolls will be. However, the people who played the game of Ur took it even further and assigned certain events with places on the board. For example, if you land on the 6th square, you'll make a good friend in the next few days. So not only was the game of Ur a tool to showcase how faith works, it was also used as a form of divination. The thought that kept such a simple game interesting was the idea that you actually have a say in what you roll. And it is not just a random number. Each die is guided by an angel's hand to give you what you need, or rather, what you deserve. This is where manifestation and magic come into play, as it was common knowledge that through our thoughts we can control the roll of a die. The game became a training ground for our connection to the divine. Another great example of an ancient faith simulation is Snakes and Ladders, or Chutes and Ladders for my American homies. In India, this game was known as Moksha Patam. And in Moksha Patam, we essentially roll a die and then just move our piece. The one who reaches the top, or heaven, first wins. Along the way, there are ladders, which lead you up further, or snakes, who take you back down. The ladders often had pictures of good deeds attached to them, and the snakes bad deeds, such as killing and theft. Not only was the game teaching you the principles of faith by having to roll a good high number, but it also teaches you the ancient Indian principle of karma, taught by the ladders, the snakes. Good deeds lead to more good, and bad deeds lead to more bad in your life. However, it is not pure chance on which deeds your piece will land, and as again, you are in control of the outcome of each roll. And another interesting observation, no matter how long it takes, at one point you will reach heaven and become one with God. Another essential teaching in most esoteric and Eastern spiritual traditions. As we can see from these examples, one important archetype that needed to be simulated and shown was faith. Another one was also hidden in the royal game of Ur, which is the battle between darkness and light, good and evil. Most two-player games tell the story of two warring factions. In chess we have white and black, in Go we have white and black, and in the game of Ur we also have white and black. The game of Ur most likely evolved into backgammon later in its lifespan, and there the battle between darkness and light is even more obvious. Checkers is another plainly obvious example. What's also an interesting observation is that there's also always a hint of one thing being contained in the other. The original pieces of the game of Ur have black or white dots to imply that even in the darkness there's a bit of light. And the natural part of the game, the board, is almost always constructed of both colors in an equal distribution. As the world itself is neither good nor bad, it's an equal measure of both. Light and dark working in harmony. The two players fight against each other in various ways, recreating various wartime scenarios. It is well known that chess was actually used to teach military officers and leaders strategies for wartime. Two forces opposed of each other create a contradiction and a struggle. Yet it is immediately obvious by looking at the game that both sides are equal. And this is the essence of this simulation. But hidden within is something even greater. Since the equality is inherent in the game design, the lesson translates further onto the border of the magic circle. Since both parties are equal, it is for us to decide which player has the upper hand. The complete balance hints to another force in the universe, the player, and thus their skill, their thoughts. Anyhow, lastly, before we get to the big point of this video, I want to discuss the third primal archetype in ancient or old games, which is games of creation. These games became popular in the medieval times and late 18th or 19th century. Games such as dominoes and mahjong, which use tiles of various forms. What's common in all of these games is that you create something in front of you as you go, or you collect and reconstruct something. In mahjong, you're literally taking the role of a god or wind, trying to create a bird. And I know it's kind of silly if you look at the game, but wait for it. The word mahjong comes from early words describing a sparrow, and that is exactly what we are trying to create. You need 4 limbs, which can be sets of 3 or 4, or sequences of tiles. And once you got your 2 legs and 2 arms or wings, you finish the mahjong off with a pair, also known as the head or eyes. And another neat detail, people also called the game mahjong or sparrow because the tiles make a sort of bird sound when you shuffle them. Tiles were not only teaching you the spiritual practice of creation, depicting the beauty and perfection in systems around us, they were also used for divination, throwing them sort of like the I Ching. People would see certain things in formations that were formed, like throwing bones. Games were seen as rituals and spiritual sequences and events. They had actual meaning beyond the bounds of the game. They simulated something far greater than what was mechanically depicted. I could go more in depth on these topics, but I'll keep that for the future. Because for now, there's a different question I want to answer. If only there was a way to simulate the human, if only there was a way to simulate us as people, what would that be? When we look at the tile laying games, they are already very close to the human simulation. Because as Dracula once said in Castlevania Symphony of the Night,
"What is a man? A miserable little pile of secrets."
And he was absolutely right. What I'm holding here is a miserable little pile of secrets, a deck of cards. Card games are one of the most spread forms of games we know as humans. Their popularity comes with their practicality and ease of production. A deck of cards is easily drawn or nowadays printed. It's lightweight and fits into the smallest of pockets. Card games are fast, complex, and unpredictable. They introduce a sort of unseen balance of passive and active mechanics into the other archetypes. Whereas simulations of faith are mostly passive and simulations of struggle are fully active, card games provide a meaningful combination of both. The deck is the passive aspect, and what you do with the drawn hand is the active. Okay, so now what does any of this have to do with ourselves? Think about card games on a more abstract level. They simulate life and its aspects as well. In life, we're being faced with a certain situation, whether it is a problem or just a normal occurrence. And us as humans have a certain repertoire of reactions that we can quote-unquote play or perform. We all know it as the saying, the cards we've been dealt. And what decides which cards we draw? The deck. Each and every one of us is a deck of cards. Of course, in no way are we traditional French playing cards. Because in which sense do diamonds and spades and so on represent something as complex as a human? More on that later. We sort of have to see each card as an answer. Let's take traditional trick-taking games, for example. Someone plays a card, let's say the 7 of clubs, and our goal is to take the trick and thus play the higher number. So the game or life asks you the question, how do you react to a 7 of clubs? What is your answer or reaction? And our answer is the 9 of clubs, one of our drawn cards. And thus, our answer surpasses the played card and we take the trick. Let's apply card games more to real life, to more concretely show where I'm going with this idea. Let's say you're in a fight with your partner. He or she is mad that you didn't do the dishes. And she says, "You never do the dishes, it's so annoying." Or something like that. Now you draw from your deck of cards, your hypothetical deck of cards, and there you have all your available behaviors and answers. One card says, "I'm sorry, I forgot, I will better myself." Another says, "Yeah, but it doesn't matter, it's just the dumbest dishes." And one says, I don't know, "Chill, why are you so angry?" And other ones could just be actions like, "Just do the dishes," or "Walk away." Is probably the worst option. All of these reactions will be drawn, and you have to choose which one to play. The deck in this case is you as a person. And which cards you decide to put into your deck is up for you to decide. However, sometimes cards enter your deck unknowingly, or you encounter a life event that puts new unwanted cards inside. For example, you had your first breakup and you acquire the fear of abandonment card. We can describe life as a deck builder. Every one of us is building a unique deck for themselves. That's why we are radically different people. There's two types of games in which you build a deck, meaning that you construct your own pool of cards rather than drawing from a central one. The first games that explored that concept were collectible card games, or trading card games, known as TCGs. In Magic the Gathering, which was the first TCG, you buy cards in packs. Contained in each pack are random cards. So you're kind of drawing from a collective consciousness of cards when buying a pack. It's like drawing 5 cards from a giant deck that was pre-printed, that you can keep forever. Out of the acquired cards, each player could build their own totally unique decks. And then players could meet and actually battle against each other using their decks. Some people call the battling the actual game. However, I think the game already starts with the purchase of the packs and the deck customization. Heck, I even know people who own like almost every card from the original years, and they don't even use the cards for battling. They just collect and sort and keep. In the case of TCGs, the deck building is external of the actual game, meaning that the game you play with the cards doesn't involve building your deck itself. It is a two-step process basically. You build the deck and then you play. Sort of like two games bundled into one. The deck building is a form of expression that was not seen before in games. Not only tells it a lot about what things the player prefers, blue, green, white, deck, etc. Or in the case of Yu-Gi-Oh! Zombies, dinosaurs, kitchen utensils or anime girls, it also tells a story of playstyle. Do you like to play aggressively, summon one monster and buff it all the time, or rush down the player with multiple monsters? Everything is possible. TCGs offer an infinite abyss of player expression and freedom, and of course the cards also tell a physical story, and an economic one. How much did you spend? Where are the cards from? Did you pull them or bought them loose? Or maybe you even won a card from someone or a tournament. We used to do this crazy thing in school where the loser would have to give one card from their deck to the other person and the other player could pick it. That's just devious. Sometimes they just picked like their rarest or strongest card to be mean, or a vital combo piece. And it's like literally taking a piece of your soul and letting go of it forever. These are the physical connections to deck building, of course, are being lost with digital versions of TCGs. But I would not want to play Yu-Gi-Oh! Physically in its current state anyways. But think about these decks as part of you in the real world. Maybe you have different decks according to which kind of opponent you're going to face. Or in Yu-Gi-Oh! There's this thing called a side deck, from which you can exchange cards according to your opponent's deck. It's the same with, for example, conversation. We use a different language for different people, meaning different decks. If we talk to our partner, we use the chill deck, and then there's the corporate deck for business, and we change some cards from our side deck of the corporate deck if we have to face the job interview opponent, for example. An interesting game that changes the TCG formula is Keyforge, in which you skip the deck building process altogether. It's another level of gambling basically, in which each pack contains a fully complete and randomized deck. You're not allowed to change the content of a deck, so what you pull is what you're stuck with. Sure, you can buy another deck, but you will not be allowed to swap cards from one to another. It removes the personalization of TCGs and replaces it with a sort of acceptance. This is what I am, and I cannot do anything about it. Might as well just go with it. It doesn't really depict what I'm going for here, but it is a very interesting twist on the concept regardless. One thing that is incredibly fascinating is the meta of Keyforge, as there are no deck building guides and no best decks, because everyone has a unique deck. It sort of puts the player back in control of what's good and bad, so the meta is card driven, but from a player perspective, and not a card one. Keyforge was designed by Richard Garfield, and he is also the guy who made Magic the Gathering. It seems like he kinda wanted to break free from the original TCG design, as he also co-created Mindbug, which goes even a step further, having a large card pool accessible to all players, from which they randomly draw their deck at the beginning of a match. So you just have to acquire a basic set and you can already play with 2 players. The only thing being personalized here is the central deck, which you can add expansions to at will. I might make separate videos on all of these titles in the future, as there's a lot of beautiful concepts and designs hidden within those games. But for now, let's continue to to the second type of deck building game. Jesus! So a big problem of TCGs was the fact that you would have to go out and get the cards, put them together, and research what works and what doesn't, all before even playing a single game. But what if we could build our deck while playing? What if we could eliminate the first step entirely? And this is where we enter the deck builder. The first known game with deck building mechanics was StarCraft, the board game, but the first game to fully base its gameplay around the mechanic, and the one game that popularized the genre, was a special little gem called Dominion. In Dominion, every player starts with the same 10-card deck consisting of 7 coppers and 3 estates, which give you victory points. In front of you is what we now know as a centralized static shop, from which players could buy cards. So you draw 5 cards from your deck, and with the money drawn you can add cards from the shop into your deck. And these cards let you do various things, from acquiring more expensive cards to generating money or removing cards from your deck. What makes Dominion so beloved and fascinating is that each game you draw new randomly chosen 10 cards that can be bought throughout the same game. Each game is completely different. In one you're barely scraping by, trying to get your first silver to finally have a chance of acquiring higher cards. In others, you gain gold on turn 3 and then you start snowballing from there. It's never the same, and I still find new things to achieve after probably having played hundreds of games in physical and many more online. New expansions add new cards and concepts that can potentially show up in the shop, and each new set adds dozens of more crazy combinations you can find. Another big aspect that sets Dominion apart for me is the storytelling aspect, that is subtle but definitely there. Each deck represents a kingdom, or more specifically, your kingdom. The victory points represent the lands you own, and the treasure cards your wealth. Adding witches and militia into your kingdom makes your place a more hostile domain, while adding markets and villages will help you have more things to do, more life. Adding a highway will make cards cheaper, cause you're literally introducing infrastructure to your lands. And drawing curses breaks up your hand, showing you how some parts of your country are being destroyed by evil forces. Each player is telling their unique story through building their own unique deck each game. A deck builder that came out around the same time as Dominion, because people really seem to like the concept of deck building and its modular and expansive nature, is Ascension. Ascension is one of my favorite games as well, but with a small tweak. It achieves a completely different feel than Dominion. In Ascension, we're acquiring people for our team or army from a centralized random shop, meaning that over the course of the game, new cards will constantly show up. Where Dominion was all about planning your deck right from the start and looking for synergies, Ascension leans more into a competitive drafting style of gameplay that forces you to speculate and act out of your intuition. There's 2 resources, money and power. Money is used to acquire cards and power to defeat enemies. Once a card is bought or slain, a new one immediately shows up. And this card is random. There's a constant flow of cards. Another giant difference making the game feel more fast and like an RPG rather than a strategy game is the fact that points are chips that don't go in your deck. See, in Dominion, cards that give you points are in your deck, potentially breaking your hand because they don't lead to other actions. In Ascension, these points are located outside of your deck, freeing you to only fight and buy. You don't really spend your turns milling through your deck that much because of it. Ascension also leads more to playing just one more round because of its more random nature, but there's still a lot of strategic pool manipulation going on. For example, if you know your opponent deck is weak in fighting, you can leave monsters with high values out to block the options on the opponent's turn. While Dominion is more focused on telling a story about a place and its people, Ascension tells a more vague story about an army that starts to specialize in certain tasks. But we are still not really simulating a singular human. See, a big downside of deck builders is the physical load of actually playing one in real life. I own almost every Dominion set, and it is impossible to physically select a starting shop. I use an app for that, and then I still have to set it up for about 10 to 20 minutes. Looking for cards in my giant box and various other containers. I mean, dude, look at this, this is just nuts. I mean, we're talking of 10,000s of cards I have to organize and manage when generating a new set. And then when it comes to playing, one of the biggest annoyances is the constant shuffling. Every few turns, you shuffle your deck. And I remember as a teenager, my mom would go ballistic when we were playing Dominion because of all the goddamn noise. The concept of the deck builder doesn't really lend itself to physicality. Same goes for Ascension. I know you are technically not supposed to mix more than 2 expansions with each other, but it's a lot of fun and just seems like a natural thing to do. I own all of these cards, why not throw them all together in a pile? But you end up having this giant ass deck that is like virtually unshuffleable. Unshuffleable? Damn, that's a crazy word. Both games can nowadays be played online, on your phone, or computer, or whatever you use to play games, I guess. And playing these games on a digital device kind of showed how similar they are to roguelikes. You start with a blank slate, and you get randomly generated items, or cards in this case, and every playthrough is unique. The only thing missing is the permadeath, but hey, if you lose, you're never going to see your deck again. The next logical step would be to combine those things and make a deck building roguelike. Enter Slay the Spire, the granddaddy of modern deck builders and probably the most influential roguelike next to, well, Rogue and Binding of Isaac maybe. In Slay the Spire, we play one of 4 characters, each having a unique starting deck and a unique card pool to choose new cards from. You climb up a tower, and along the way you go through events on a map. Some are just text, some are jobs, treasure chests, but most of them are battles. The battles are being fought with your cards. It's a JRPG turn-based system with you taking a turn attacking or blocking or whatever your cards let you do, and then the enemies doing the same. However, what's quite clever about Slay the Spire is that the enemies show you what their intentions are, so you can plan what to do accordingly. Slay the Spire is an incredible game, and one of the most polished artworks I've ever experienced, and I'm currently working on a review of it. However, today I'm concerned about the different aspect of this game. The way your deck tells a story about you. The way the deck simulates a human, a character. See, in STS you play a singular entity, not something abstract like a kingdom or a group of people. Your deck is you. And it tells a lot about your character. Some people will play more defensively and add some more blocking and defensive cards to their deck. Others will play more aggressively and add more attacks. Some make crazy endless looping card synergies and break the game, and so on. There's a lot of options, and it beautifully tells a story of the battle by the name, concept, and images on the cards. It's incredibly thematic. Again, just as mentioned before, the game throws a question at you, like, oh, this maggot is about to attack, how are you going to react? Your hand is filled with your answers, and you decide over the course of the game which answers you're able to draw at a given moment. What's even better storytelling is the negative cards that can be added to your deck, like an injury card that simply does nothing. So when you pull it, it simulates you having some sort of injury on your leg or something, and it's hindering you from doing more things on your turn. Slay the Spine depicts mental health in a wonderful way. For example, there are cards that cause weakness, as your character is literally losing faith in the situation, or regret, where you lose health points for every card that you didn't play. It's a wonderful system that simulates an actual human, or whatever this is, with simple and powerful mechanics. It is here where the power to simulate humans can finally be fully connected to the deck of cards. Dozens of deck builders have been made after Slay the Spire, and one of the reasons is that the concept of the roguelike deck builder is immediately understandable and connects to us on a deeper level. It is the control of the luck-based unknown that satisfies thousands of players. Spiritual work is extremely similar to building a deck. In Gnosticism, but also in other major forms of esoteric teaching, there is this concept of the many plural egos that control our being. One must think of themselves as a machine that is being controlled by different drivers throughout the day. When we're angry, the ego of anger takes over the steering wheel, and thus our true being leaves the driver's seat. Only if we become aware of the many egos that take over will we be finally free and lose our status of machine. Well, building a deck is exactly the same. Each card is an ego that we can pull on our turn. It is uncertain what's coming up, but if we know the content of our deck, we can prepare. For example, I know when I'm teaching a new board game to someone and the person doesn't get the rules rather quickly, an ego of anger will be drawn from my deck. I know this from experience. Or on some days I draw an ego of frustration. But lately, I've been adding way more acceptance and understanding cards into my deck. And I'm trying hard through the meditation action to get rid of the egoic cards. We are a deck of egos, and our goal in life is to optimize that deck to be meta viable, and our deck should cause the least pain to us as a user. Arkham Horror, the living card game, has the deck building aspect closest to the real world in my opinion, but it's quite pessimistic as it is like a Lovecraft game. See, in Arkham Horror you can defeat certain challenges with your deck, which are like levels. These can be bought in new expansions and mission packs. Some stories or missions add new cards to your deck, but these cards are not always positive. In the setting of a Lovecraftian world, cards like Amnesia, Paranoia, and Psychosis can enter your deck, and they'll stay with you, clogging up your deck for the upcoming challenges. You'll also start with a few when you build your character, creating a very nice way of showing you who this person truly is. There's certain conditions that have to be met in order to discard your mental health condition, so you can cope with them, but it is almost impossible to remove them fully out of your deck. It shows the entire worldview of the game, mainly that people have certain issues which they can control, but they cannot get rid of them. Unlike in Slay the Spire, where you can simply trash an injury or curse. But in Arkham Horror, almost all cards are describing of the abilities and aspects of a character, such as physical training or mind over matter. It's these describing words that really paint a broader picture of a wonderful world and person. While this concept of the human being being able to be represented as a deck of cards seems like a new game design idea from the 2010s, it's actually a rather old concept that most people are aware of but never connect to it. As described at the beginning of this lecture, games have been used for divination from the beginning of time. And you might even argue that the need for divination was even higher than the need for play. But the most widespread form of Western divination, besides astrology, already assumes that the human, and thus reality, can be represented by a deck of cards. The tarot. I'm not going to go into detail of the origin of the tarot, as I already wrote a thesis on this during university, and I might make a separate lecture on it, but there's multiple approaches to its origin. The esotericists claim the various origins to be legitimate, such as Hermes Trismegistus, here we go again, or Kabbalah, or being channeled by angels and so on. Scientists and historians attribute it to an Italian royal family that added a higher rank to their deck of cards for increased complexity. Later, because of the in-game power, people started attributing special spiritual essences to the higher cards. The history is very blurry, and the more you look into it, the more you realize we don't know anything about it. And one thing, however, that's for certain, is that the structure of the tarot is modeled one-to-one from tarot cards, which are being widely played in Europe. Anyhow, so how does the tarot actually work in predicting the future or assessing your current state? Well, you ask a question and the deck gives you an answer. Inside the deck are 78 answers, each card offering certain advice contained in its symbology, meaning, and the collected consciousness. People use various spreads to create a broader picture or a more precise prediction. In each spread, each position has a different meaning, and together with the meaning contained in the card, the answer is formed. So you ask the cards or the medium, and the cards will be shuffled, and then through various methods such as intuition or chance, cards will be selected and put out in the spread. If you consult the tarot, you need to believe in that the universe can alter the cards that are being drawn, or that there are no coincidences. Those cards drawn are not drawn by mere chance, they are personally chosen by the universe for you. In esoteric modern Gnosticism, it is believed that all of the cards are contained in everything, meaning that the human, us, is consisting out of all aspects contained in the tarot. The perfect being has all cards in equal distribution, meaning that when we consult the tarot, we will draw out the part of ourselves that is the most relevant for the upcoming situation. It is a deck that you can trust in, and with faith, the deck will always provide the right cards. But what if we could change the deck itself to our needs? Let's say that we remove all the cards that are associated with quote-unquote negative things. That's when we are performing magic with a K. We alter reality through our actions, and we start building our own unique tarot deck. That we are still controlled by chance as we are pulling random cards out of the deck. Unless one of the strongest and most effective strategies in Dominion is to thin out your deck completely by trashing. That's why in the original set, the chapel card was considered to be the strongest card. Redeem your sins in the chapel, if you know what I'm saying. Once your deck is consisting of only a few cards, you always draw the same cards over and over again. Chance has been eradicated, as you only have a certain amount of cards left. Slay the Spire has similar strategies. So what if we make Nordwar. So what if we make our tarot deck consist out of as many cards as we choose for the spread? Then we would be certain of what's to come. A perfectly thinned out deck. A perfectly built deck. But at this point we can just pick the cards out of the deck without drawing them, right? Right. In the board card game Mage Wars, this is exactly what you do. What if you could simply pick any card from your deck and play it? Basically, mitigating drawing. In Mage Wars, each player puts their cards into a spell book, which is basically a card binder, You can put spells into your book based on a certain point system, where stronger spells cost more points, or if the spell is out of your class school, it's also more expensive. However, doing gameplay, you can choose any 2 spells from your book and cast them. There's no drawing, no luck, no chance, no faith. It's magic. Of course, you're still bound to mana points and a 2 spell per round limit, but in a true magic fashion, you can simply pull out the cards you want and play them. You are in full control of chance, of life. Plus, flipping through your deck in form of an actual book is kinda iconic. A true magician takes the full tarot deck and simply chooses which cards to put in, which slot of the spread to put it in. It's fully mastering the reality of being. So when we look at ourselves through the lens of a deck of cards, we start to see life as a game in which defeating our egos is thinning out our deck. Every day we need to observe which cards no longer serve us, and then learn how to trash them effectively, until our deck is the perfect collection of meaningful cards. And then we can go on to the next step of full control. When we mastered the skill of purposefully deciding which cards to play and simply playing them, then we have become a fully realized human being. But until then, keep on milling and thinning out your egos, as you are a deck of cards.